The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the general store, sending up a cloud of dust that hung in the dry Kansas air. And Jacob Lawson knew before the door even opened that his life was about to change forever. He had been leaning against the post outside Morrison's general store, watching the October sun paint the buildings of Great Bend in shades of gold and amber, when he spotted the stagecoach rumbling down the dirt road. His heart had been hammering against his ribs for the past hour, ever since word spread that the noon coach was bringing a passenger addressed to him. A mail-order bride. The very thought still felt foreign in his mind, like trying on boots that did not quite fit. But after 2 years of lonely nights on his ranch and the constant pestering from his sister about finding a wife, he had finally placed the advertisement. He had exchanged exactly 4 letters with a woman named Julia Newberry from Philadelphia, and now here she was, arriving in the flesh. The driver climbed down from his perch and opened the coach door. Jacob straightened, running a hand through his dark hair and brushing the dust from his shirt. He was 30 years old, weathered by sun and hard work, and suddenly felt as nervous as a schoolboy. A gloved hand emerged first, delicate fingers gripping the door frame. Then a boot appeared, worn but respectable, followed by the rustle of dark blue traveling clothes. Jacob took a step forward, his smile already forming, ready to greet the woman who had written such thoughtful letters about wanting a fresh start out west. But when Julia Newberry finally stepped down and turned to face him, the smile died on his lips. The left side of her face was a storm of purple and yellow bruising. Her eye was swollen nearly shut, the delicate skin around it painted in angry colors that made Jacob's stomach turn. Her lip was split, scabbed over but still clearly painful. She held herself stiffly, one arm wrapped around her ribs as though protecting an injury beneath her dress. Their eyes met, and in hers he saw something that cut him deeper than any wound he had ever taken. Fear. Pure, raw fear that made her whole body tremble as she stood there in the street, one small carpetbag in her hand, looking at him like she expected him to strike her right then and there. "Miss Newberry." His voice came out rougher than he intended, thick with the rage building in his chest. Not at her, never at her, but at whoever had done this. She flinched at the sound, and that small movement broke something inside him. "Yes." Her voice was barely a whisper, refined and eastern, shaking like autumn leaves. "I apologize for my appearance, Mr. Lawson. The journey was difficult." Difficult? The word was so inadequate for what he was seeing that Jacob almost laughed, except there was nothing funny about any of this. He closed the distance between them slowly, carefully, like approaching a spooked horse. Several townspeople had stopped to stare, and he could feel their eyes burning into his back. Martha Henderson was whispering to her daughter. Old Tom from the saloon had paused mid-step, his mouth hanging open. "Who did this to you?" Jacob asked, keeping his voice low and steady despite the fury burning through his veins. Julia's good eye widened. "It does not matter now. I am here, and I will be a good wife to you, I promise. I can cook and clean, and I will not be any trouble at all." The words tumbled out of her in a desperate rush, and she took a half step back, stumbling slightly on the uneven ground. Jacob caught her elbow, gentle as could be, and felt her entire body go rigid under his touch. He released her immediately, holding his hands up where she could see them. "Easy now," he said softly. "I am not going to hurt you. I need you to understand that right here and right now. I am not going to hurt you." She stared at him, and he watched as confusion flickered across her battered face, like she could not quite comprehend what he was saying. Like the concept of a man not hurting her was foreign as a language she had never learned. "Let me make you a promise, Miss Newberry." Jacob kept his hands where she could see them, open and empty. "No one is ever going to hurt you again. Not while I am breathing. Do you hear me? No one." A tear slipped down her bruised cheek, and she quickly wiped it away with a trembling hand. You do not have to pretend kindness for the townspeople, Mr. Lawson. I understand how these arrangements work. Do you? He felt his jaw tighten. Because I do not think you do. Come on, let us get you somewhere you can rest. Are you hungry? Thirsty? When did you last eat? Yesterday morning. The admission came out small, almost ashamed. Jacob picked up her carpet bag, moving slowly so as not to startle her. Right then. First we get some food in you, then we talk. Does that sound acceptable? She nodded, still watching him like he might transform into something monstrous at any moment. It made his heart ache in ways he had not known were possible. What kind of hell had this woman lived through to be so afraid? He gestured toward the general store. Morrison serves a decent lunch. Nothing fancy, but it is hot and filling. Julia followed him, maintaining a careful distance. He could hear her breathing, quick and shallow, and knew she was fighting to keep herself together. The pride in that, the sheer strength it took to hold her head up and walk through this town with everyone staring, made him respect her more than she could possibly know. Inside the store, the smell of coffee and bacon grease filled the air. Sarah Morrison looked up from behind the counter, her friendly smile freezing when she saw Julia's face. To her credit, she recovered quickly, her expression shifting to one of warm welcome. Jacob Lawson, is this your bride? Sarah came around the counter, wiping her hands on her apron. She was a motherly woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude that Jacob had always appreciated. This is Miss Julia Newberry, just arrived from Philadelphia. Jacob guided Julia toward one of the small tables near the window. Sarah, could we get 2 plates of whatever you have hot, and coffee if you have it? Of course, of course. Sarah bustled away, shooting him a meaningful look that said they would be talking later. Jacob pulled out a chair for Julia, and she sank into it like her legs could no longer hold her. Up close, in the better light, he could see more bruises on her neck, finger-shaped marks that made his hands curl into fists. He forced himself to breathe, to push down the violence rising in his chest. She did not need his anger right now, even if it was not directed at her. He took the seat across from her, careful to keep the table between them, giving her space. Will you tell me what happened? Julia's good eye fixed on the table. Does it matter? Yes. She was quiet for a long moment, and then she said, I was engaged. In Philadelphia. To a man my father chose. He was wealthy, respected. Everyone said I was lucky. Her voice was flat, emotionless, but her hands were shaking where they rested on the table. He started hitting me 3 months before the wedding. Small things at first where no one would see, then bigger things. My father said I must have done something to provoke him, that I needed to be more obedient. The wedding was 2 weeks away when I saw your advertisement in the paper. Jacob felt sick. So you ran. I stole money from my father's desk, enough for the train and the stagecoach. I wrote to you and I left in the middle of the night. She finally looked up at him and her voice cracked. He found me at the station. My fiancé, he was so angry. He dragged me into an alley and he beat me until I could barely stand. But I fought him, Mr. Lawson. I had a hatpin and I stabbed him in the arm, and when he let go I ran. I hid in a church until the train left, and then I got on, and I kept moving west, and here I am. She laughed, a broken sound. Here I am, and I imagine I look nothing like what you expected. Sarah chose that moment to arrive with 2 steaming plates of beef stew and thick slices of bread, along with 2 cups of strong coffee. She set them down gently, squeezed Julia's shoulder with surprising tenderness, and walked away without a word. Jacob pushed one of the plates toward Julia. Eat. She picked up the spoon with a shaking hand and took a small bite. Then another. Then she was eating like she was starving, which she probably was, and Jacob ate his own meal in silence, giving her time. When she finally slowed down, he said, You were right about one thing. You do not look like what I expected. Her face fell, and she set down her spoon. You look braver, he continued. The woman I was expecting was someone looking for adventure, maybe, or a better life. What I got was a woman who fought her way out of hell and kept going even when the world tried to break her. That is a hell of a lot more than I expected. Julia stared at him, bread forgotten in her hand. You are not angry that I came here looking like this, that I brought my troubles with me. The only thing I am angry about is that anyone hurt you in the first place. Jacob leaned forward slightly. Listen to me, Julia. I do not know what kind of men you have known in your life, but I am not them. I have a ranch about 5 miles outside of town. 300 acres, good grazing land, a house that is sturdy if not fancy. I run cattle and I work hard. I am not rich, but I am not poor either. I placed that advertisement because I wanted a partner, someone to share my life with, not a servant, not a punching bag, a partner. Do you understand? I want to believe you. The words came out choked. I want to so badly. Then believe me. He reached across the table slowly and stopped with his hand palm up between them, an invitation, not a demand. We can take this as slow as you need, but I meant what I said outside. No one is going to hurt you again. I swear it on my life. Julia looked at his hand for a long time. Then, trembling, she reached out and placed her fingers in his palm. Her hand was small and cold, and he closed his fingers around it gently, like holding something precious and fragile. They sat like that for a moment, connected across the table, and Jacob felt something shift in the air between them. Not love, not yet, but the first fragile thread of trust, delicate as spider silk, but there nonetheless. What happens now? Julia asked quietly. Now we finish eating. Then I introduce you to some people in town. The minister, the doctor to check your injuries, maybe the sheriff if you want to make a report. After that, I take you home. He paused. I have a sister, Margaret. She lives in town with her husband and their 2 boys. She has been dying to meet you, but I can ask her to wait a few days if you need time to settle. You told your family about me. Of course I did. Margaret was thrilled. She has been trying to marry me off for years. He smiled a little. Fair warning, she is going to mother hen you something fierce when she sees your face. She is protective like that. Julia took a sip of her coffee, and some color was starting to return to her cheeks. I would like to see a doctor. Everything hurts, and I want to make sure nothing is broken. Good. Dr. Patterson is a decent man. He will be gentle. Jacob finished his stew and drained his coffee. After that, we should probably talk about the marriage itself. He felt her tense up again. What about it? I am in no rush, he said carefully. We can get married tomorrow if you want the legality of it, the protection of being my wife. Or we can wait until you feel ready. Whatever makes you comfortable. But I want you to know, either way, you will have your own room in my house. I will not touch you unless you want me to. You have my word on that. Julia's eyes filled with tears, and this time she did not try to hide them. Why are you being so kind to me? Because you deserve kindness. The answer was simple, obvious to him, even if it clearly was not to her. Because every person deserves to feel safe in their own home. Because when I asked for a wife, what I was really asking for was someone to build a life with, and you cannot build anything on a foundation of fear. She wiped at her tears with her napkin, wincing when she touched the bruises. I do not know how to do this, how to trust again. We will figure it out together. Jacob stood up and left money on the table for Sarah. One day at a time, one moment at a time. There is no rush, Julia. We have all the time in the world. Dr. Patterson's office was just down the street, marked by a simple wooden sign. The doctor himself was a thin man in his 60s with wire-rimmed spectacles and gentle hands. He examined Julia in the back room while Jacob waited outside, pacing the length of the small waiting area and trying not to imagine in too much detail what that bastard in Philadelphia had done to her. When they finally emerged, Dr. Patterson looked grim. 3 cracked ribs, extensive bruising, and a lot of muscle damage that is going to take time to heal. She needs rest and good food. No heavy lifting for at least a month. He looked at Jacob meaningfully. She is going to be in considerable pain for a while. I will take care of her, Jacob promised. Julia was moving even more stiffly than before, like the examination had awakened all her injuries. But there was something different in her face now, a little less fear, a little more curiosity as she looked at him. They made one more stop at the sheriff's office, where Sheriff Tom Bradley listened to Julia's story with a deepening frown. I can send a telegram to Philadelphia. Let them know you are here and under my protection, he offered. Make it clear that anyone coming after you will be dealt with accordingly. Yes, please, Julia said quietly. I do not think my fiancé will follow, but my father might try to force me to return. You are over 18, Bradley asked. 22. Then you are a free woman, and no one can force you to do anything. The sheriff tipped his hat to her. Welcome to Great Bend, Miss Newberry. You are safe here. By the time they finished in town, the sun was starting to dip toward the horizon, painting the prairie in shades of orange and gold. Jacob had a wagon waiting, his 2 bay horses stamping their feet impatiently. He helped Julia up onto the seat, acutely aware of how she winced with every movement, and then climbed up beside her. The ride out to the ranch was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet than before. Julia watched the landscape rolling past, the endless expanse of prairie grass and the big sky overhead. It is so open here, she said finally. So much space. Does it bother you? No. She tilted her head back, looking up at the sky. It is freeing. In Philadelphia, everything was crowded, pressed together. So many people watching all the time. Here it feels like I could breathe. You can breathe here, Jacob assured her, as much as you want. The ranch came into view as they crested a low hill. It was not much to look at, Jacob knew. A simple 2-story house with a wraparound porch, a large barn, a chicken coop, and several corrals. But it was his, built with his own hands over the past 6 years, and he was proud of it. It is lovely, Julia said, and she sounded like she meant it. He pulled the wagon up to the house and helped her down carefully. Let me show you around. The inside of the house was clean but sparse, decorated with the simple practicality of a man living alone. The main floor had a kitchen with a good iron stove, a sitting area with 2 comfortable chairs near the fireplace, and a dining table. Upstairs were 3 bedrooms, 2 of them empty. This one is yours. Jacob opened the door to the largest of the spare rooms. He had prepared it earlier that week, putting fresh sheets on the bed, hanging curtains at the window, making sure everything was clean and welcoming. It has a lock on the door. Use it whenever you want. You do not need my permission for anything in this house, Julia. This is your home now, too. She walked into the room slowly, running her hand over the quilt on the bed. It is more than I hoped for. I will bring up your bag. There is water in the pitcher if you want to wash up, and I will start dinner in about an hour. Anything you do not eat? No. She turned to look at him, and there were tears in her eyes again. Thank you, Jacob, for everything today, for not being angry, for being kind, for making me feel like maybe I did the right thing by coming here. You did the right thing. He wanted to hug her to offer some physical comfort, but he knew it was too soon. So instead, he just smiled. Get some rest. Call if you need anything. I will be downstairs. He left her there and went down to start on dinner, his mind spinning with everything that had happened. In the space of a few hours, his entire life had shifted. He had gone from nervous anticipation to protective fury to something else, something he could not quite name yet. All he knew was that Julia Newberry had walked into his life with bruises and fear, and somehow, impossibly, he already knew he would do anything to keep her safe. Dinner was a simple affair of fried chicken, potatoes, and beans. Julia came down the stairs moving carefully, and Jacob noticed she had changed into a simple gray dress and attempted to wash her face, though the bruises stood out stark and angry against her pale skin. They ate together at the table, and Jacob told her about the ranch, about his daily routine, about the 20 head of cattle he was raising and his plans to expand. Julia listened, asking questions occasionally, and slowly some of the tension began to ease from her shoulders. "Tomorrow I will introduce you to the chickens," he said with a slight smile. "They are temperamental ladies, but they lay good eggs. I have never taken care of chickens before. I will teach you. I will teach you anything you want to know about running this place." He leaned back in his chair. "What did you do in Philadelphia? Your letters mentioned you liked to read." "I did. I do. My mother died when I was 15, and after that I mostly ran my father's household. Managed the servants, planned the meals, hosted dinners. It was all very proper and very boring." She pushed food around on her plate. "I was never allowed to do anything real, nothing that mattered. Things matter out here." Jacob gestured toward the window. "Every choice we make affects whether we eat or go hungry, whether the animals thrive or die. It is hard work, but it is honest. And you will matter, Julia. Your choices, your work, your ideas, they will all matter." She looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. "I think I am going to like it here. I think you will too." After dinner, Julia excused herself to go to bed, exhaustion written in every line of her body. Jacob cleaned up the dishes and then sat in his chair by the fireplace, staring into the flames and thinking about the woman upstairs. She was nothing like what he had imagined. The letters had been pleasant enough, polite and properly written, but they had not prepared him for the reality of Julia. For her strength, her fear, her determination. For the protective instinct that had roared to life inside him the moment he saw her bruised face. He had meant what he said. No one would hurt her again. He would make sure of it. The next few days fell into a careful rhythm. Julia woke early, clearly used to being up with the dawn, and Jacob found her in the kitchen attempting to make breakfast despite her injuries. He gently shooed her away and made her sit while he cooked, and after some initial protest, she gave in. He introduced her to the chickens as promised, and despite her nervousness, she seemed delighted by them. She named them all within the first hour, much to his amusement. "That one is Henrietta," she declared, pointing to the bossy red hen. "And that is Beatrice, and that little one is Agnes." "You cannot name them," Jacob protested without any real heat. "They are livestock." "They are ladies, and they deserve names," Julia countered, and there was a spark of life in her voice that had not been there before. He showed her around the property, introduced her to his horse, Ranger, and his milk cow, Bessie. He taught her how to collect eggs, how to milk the cow, how to tell if the animals were healthy or sick. She absorbed everything with an intensity that impressed him, asking intelligent questions and not afraid to admit when she did not understand something. In the evenings, they ate together and talked. Real conversations, not the stilted politeness of strangers. She told him about growing up in Philadelphia, about her mother's love of music, about the books she read hidden in her room. He told her about building the ranch, about his years working cattle drives before he saved enough to buy land, about his sister Margaret and her wild boys. The bruises on her face began to fade from purple to yellow-green. She moved a little easier each day as her ribs healed. But more than that, she seemed to be healing in ways that had nothing to do with her physical injuries. She smiled more. She did not flinch quite as much when he moved quickly. She started making suggestions about the house, small things like rearranging the kitchen or planting herbs near the door, and he encouraged every single one. A week after her arrival, Margaret finally descended on the ranch like a force of nature. She was 3 years younger than Jacob, with the same dark hair and a personality that filled any room she entered. She took one look at Julia's fading bruises and swept her into a careful hug. "Oh, honey," Margaret breathed. "Jacob told me, but seeing it is different. Who do I need to kill?" Julia let out a startled laugh, and Jacob saw her relax into his sister's embrace. "It is taken care of. Good." Margaret pulled back, studying Julia's face. "You are lovely, you know, Even with all this, you are absolutely lovely. My brother is a lucky man." Jacob felt his ears heat up. "Margaret, what? It is true." She turned to Julia. "Has he been taking care of you? Because if he has been anything less than a perfect gentleman, you tell me and I will box his ears." "He has been wonderful," Julia said quietly, and her eyes found Jacob's across the room. "Truly wonderful." Margaret stayed for lunch, filling the house with chatter about her boys and the gossip from town. She made Julia laugh, really laugh, and the sound was like music to Jacob's ears. When she finally left, she hugged them both and whispered to Jacob, "You did good, brother. She is special." "I know," he whispered back. That night after dinner, Julia lingered at the table instead of going straight upstairs. "Jacob, can I ask you something? Anything? Why did you place the advertisement? For a mail-order bride, I mean. You are a good man with a successful ranch. Surely there are women in town who would have been interested." Jacob considered his answer carefully. "There are a few women in town, yes, but the truth is, I am not good at the social games people play. The dancing around feelings, the not saying what you mean. I wanted something honest. Someone who was looking for the same thing I was. A real partnership built on truth from the start." He met her eyes. "Does that make sense?" "It does." She traced a pattern on the table with her finger. "I answered your advertisement because I was desperate, but I am staying because I want to. Because in 1 week you have shown me more respect and kindness than any man in my entire life. I want you to know that, Julia." Her name came out rough. "I want to get married," she continued, and her voice was steady despite the color rising in her cheeks. "Legally, I mean. For the protection it would offer. The sheriff said my father might try to make me return, and if I am your wife, he cannot do that. But I also want you to know that I understand about the separate rooms. I am not ready for anything more than that yet. I do not know when I will be. And if that is not acceptable to you, I understand, but I had to be honest." Jacob pushed back from the table and crossed to where she sat. He knelt down beside her chair so they were at eye level. "Listen to me very carefully. I am honored that you want to marry me, truly honored. And I do not give a damn how long it takes for you to feel comfortable with anything else. A month, a year, 10 years, never. I want you to be my wife because I like having you here. I like hearing you name the chickens and argue with me about the kitchen arrangement and laugh at Margaret's terrible jokes. I like who I am when you are around. The rest we will figure out if and when you are ready. Does that work for you?" Tears were streaming down her face now, but she was smiling. "Yes, that works for me. Then let us get married." He took her hand gently. "There is a minister in town, Reverend Clark. Good man, does not ask too many questions. We can do it tomorrow if you want, with Margaret and her husband as witnesses. Nothing fancy, just us making it official." "Tomorrow," Julia agreed. "I would like that very much." They were married the next afternoon in the small church at the edge of town. Julia wore a simple blue dress that Margaret had altered to fit her, and Jacob wore his best shirt and vest. Reverend Clark performed the ceremony with quiet dignity, and when Jacob slipped the simple gold band onto Julia's finger, he felt the weight of the promise he was making. To protect her, to honor her, to give her the safety and respect she deserved. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Jacob leaned in slowly, giving Julia plenty of time to pull away. She did not. Instead, she tilted her face up and he pressed the gentlest of kisses to her lips, careful of her still healing split lip. It was brief and chaste, but it sent warmth flooding through his entire body. "Hello, Mrs. Lawson," he murmured. "Hello, Mr. Lawson," she whispered back, and she was smiling. Margaret insisted on hosting a small celebration dinner at her house, and Julia seemed to genuinely enjoy herself, playing with Margaret's boys and accepting congratulations from the few townspeople who had been invited. Jacob watched her from across the room, this woman who was now his wife, and felt something deep and certain settle in his chest. He could not name it yet, was not ready to call it love, but it was strong and real and growing with each passing day. They returned to the ranch as the sun was setting, painting the prairie in shades of gold and crimson. Julia stood on the porch for a moment, looking out over the land, and Jacob came to stand beside her. "It is beautiful," she said softly. "It is." But he was not looking at the sunset. He was looking at her. She turned to face him, and in the fading light, her bruises were barely visible anymore. "Thank you for today, for making it simple and honest, for not making me feel like property being transferred from one owner to another. You are not property, Julia. You are my partner, my wife. Those are very different things." She reached out and took his hand, lacing their fingers together. It was the most intimate gesture she had initiated, and Jacob treasured it. "I am glad I answered your advertisement. I am glad I came here, even though it was terrifying. I am glad it was you waiting at that stagecoach. So am I." He squeezed her hand gently. "So am I." The weeks that followed were some of the happiest of Jacob's life. He and Julia fell into a rhythm together, working the ranch side by side. She proved to be a quick learner and a hard worker, never complaining even when the tasks were difficult or dirty. She took over the kitchen entirely, producing meals that were far better than anything Jacob had managed on his own. She started a vegetable garden near the house, even though it was late in the season, planning for next spring. She reorganized his chaotic paperwork and helped him realize he could afford to buy more cattle in the spring. But more than all of that, she became his friend. They talked for hours in the evenings, sharing stories and dreams and fears. She read to him sometimes from the books she had brought with her, and he found he loved the sound of her voice. They laughed together, worked together, built something together that felt real and solid. One evening about a month after their wedding, they were sitting on the porch watching the stars come out when Julia said, "I got a letter from my father today." Jacob tensed. "What did it say?" he demanded. "I return home immediately." "Said I had shamed the family by running away and that my fiancé was willing to forgive me despite the scandal I caused." Her voice was flat, emotionless. "He said if I did not return within 2 weeks, he would come here and drag me back himself." Rage flooded through Jacob, hot and immediate. "Like hell he will." "That is what I wrote back." Julia turned to look at him, and there was steel in her gaze. "I told him I was married now, that I had made my choice and I was never coming back, that if he or my former fiancé ever contacted me again, my husband would involve the law." She paused. "I hope that was acceptable, using you as a threat, more than acceptable." Jacob reached over and took her hand. "I meant what I promised, Julia. No one is going to hurt you again, not your father, not your ex-fiancé, not anyone. They will have to go through me first, and I promise you, that is not an easy thing to do." She squeezed his hand. "I believe you. That is the remarkable thing, Jacob. I actually believe you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and then Julia said, "Can I tell you something, always? I am starting to feel safe here. Really safe, for the first time in my entire life. I do not wake up in the morning afraid of what the day will bring. I do not flinch at every sound. I trust you, and that is extraordinary to me because I did not think I would ever trust a man again." She took a shaky breath. "What I am trying to say, very badly, is that I think I am ready to be a real wife to you if you still want that." Jacob's heart was hammering in his chest. "Julia, I need you to be very sure. I do not want you to feel pressured or obligated. Our arrangement as it is works just fine for me. I am sure." She turned on the bench to face him fully. "I know my own mind, Jacob. This is not obligation. This is me choosing you the same way I chose to get on that train and come out here. I am choosing you because you are good and kind and patient, because you make me laugh, because you have shown me what it means to be respected, because somewhere along the way I fell in love with you, and I want all of this to be real." The world seemed to stop spinning. "You love me." "Yes." She said it simply, certainly. "I love you, Jacob Lawson. I think I have for a while now, but I was afraid to say it, afraid you did not feel the same way." He cupped her face gently in his hands, mindful of her healed bruises. "Julia, I have been in love with you since about the third day you were here, when you named all the chickens and told me with a straight face that they deserved dignity and respect. You are the bravest, strongest, most remarkable woman I have ever met, and I thank God every single day that you walked off that stagecoach." Her eyes were shining with tears. "Really? Really?" He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind, and kissed her. Not the gentle brush of lips from their wedding, but a real kiss, deep and full of all the feeling he had been holding back for weeks. She kissed him back with equal fervor, her hands coming up to grip his shirt, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Julia laughed. "Take me inside, husband. We have a lot of time to make up for." "Yes, madam." Jacob stood and swept her up into his arms, making her squeal with surprise and delight. He carried her across the threshold of their home and up the stairs, not to her room or his, but to the master bedroom they would now share. He set her down gently beside the bed and lit the lamp, wanting to see her face. "We go at your pace," he said seriously. "If anything makes you uncomfortable or scared, you tell me and we stop. Understood? Understood." She reached up and started unbuttoning his shirt, her fingers steady despite the magnitude of what they were doing. "But I am not scared, Jacob. Not of you, not anymore." They came together slowly, carefully, with a tenderness that brought tears to both their eyes. Jacob worshipped every inch of her with his hands and mouth, erasing the memory of violence with gentleness, replacing fear with pleasure. Julia gave herself to him completely, trusting him with her body the same way she had learned to trust him with her heart. And when they finally joined together, it felt like coming home, like two pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. Afterwards, they lay tangled together in the lamplight, Julia's head on Jacob's chest, his arms wrapped securely around her. "That was nothing like what I expected," she murmured. "Good nothing or bad nothing. Very, very good nothing." She propped herself up to look at him, her hair falling around her shoulders in waves. "I did not know it could be like that. Gentle and passionate at the same time. I thought it would hurt or I would be afraid, but I was not. I just felt loved. You are loved." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "So incredibly loved. I love you too." She settled back against his chest with a contented sigh. "Thank you for being patient with me, for giving me time to heal. I would have waited forever if that was what you needed." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, and Jacob thought that this was what happiness felt like. Not the wild excitement of youth, but the deep, steady contentment of finding exactly where you belonged. The next morning, Jacob woke to find Julia already up and dressed, standing at the window looking out over the ranch. He came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, pressing a kiss to her temple. "What are you thinking about?" "That I want to paint this room a cheerful yellow. That we should get a dog to help with the cattle. That I want to plant roses by the porch next spring." She leaned back against him. "That I am happy, Jacob. Really, truly happy, and I did not think that was possible for me. We can paint the room any color you want. We will get the best cattle dog in Kansas, and I will help you plant a whole garden of roses if that is what you want." He turned her in his arms to face him. "I am happy too, Julia, happier than I have ever been." She kissed him, sweet and lingering, and then pulled away with a mischievous smile. "Come on then, husband. Those chickens are not going to feed themselves, and I am fairly certain Henrietta is getting impatient." They worked together all morning, falling into their established routine but with a new awareness of each other, stolen touches and secret smiles. Jacob found himself unable to stop watching her, marveling that she was his wife in every sense of the word now. Around midday, a rider appeared on the horizon, coming fast toward the ranch. Jacob felt Julia tense beside him, and he reached out to take her hand. "Stay behind me," he said quietly. As the rider got closer, Jacob recognized Sheriff Bradley. He relaxed slightly but kept Julia behind him until he was certain there was no threat. Bradley pulled his horse to a stop and tipped his hat. "Morning, folks. Sorry to disturb you." "What can we do for you, Sheriff?" Jacob asked. "Just wanted to let you know. I got a response to my telegram to Philadelphia. Seems Miss Newberry's father is making noise about coming out here to retrieve his daughter." Bradley's expression was grave. "I made it real clear that she is a married woman now and under the protection of Kansas law, but I wanted you to be aware. A man like that, with money and connections, he might try something anyway." Julia's hand tightened in Jacob's. "He would not come himself," she said, her voice steady despite her obvious fear. "He would send men, hired men who would not care about laws. Then they will find out we take care of our own out here." Jacob's voice was hard. "How much time do we have?" 3 weeks, maybe a month if we are lucky. The journey is not an easy one." Bradley looked at Julia with sympathy. "I know this is not what you wanted to hear, madam, but I thought you should know so you can be prepared." "Thank you, Sheriff." Julia stepped forward, her chin raised. "I appreciate your support, and I want you to know that I am not going back. Whatever my father sends, whatever he tries, I am not leaving my husband and my home." "Good for you, madam." Bradley tipped his hat again. "Jacob, you need any help, you let me know. We have got several men in town who would be happy to stand with you." After the sheriff left, Julia was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I am sorry I brought this trouble to your door." "Our door," Jacob corrected. "And you did not bring trouble. Your father is choosing to make trouble." "That is different." He pulled her into his arms. "Whatever comes, we will face it together. You are not alone anymore, Julia." She buried her face in his chest. "I am scared. I know, but you are also the woman who stabbed her attacker with a hatpin and ran for freedom. You are the woman who crossed half a country alone and beaten to start a new life. You are so much stronger than you give yourself credit for, and this time you do not have to be strong alone. I am right here with you." She looked up at him, and he saw his brave, fierce wife behind the fear. "What do? We prepare. We get help if we need it, and we show your father that he picked the wrong people to mess with." Jacob kissed her forehead. "Trust me, Julia, I am not going to let anyone take you away from here." The next few weeks were tense but productive. Jacob talked to the neighboring ranchers, men he had worked with and traded with for years. To a man, they promised their support if trouble came. Margaret's husband, Thomas, brought over his rifle and offered to stay at the ranch, but Jacob declined, not wanting to put his sister's family in danger. Instead, he focused on teaching Julia how to shoot. She was resistant at first. "I do not want to hurt anyone, and I pray you never have to," Jacob said, pressing his old revolver into her hands. "But I need to know you can protect yourself if something happens when I am not here. Please, Julia. Do this for me." So she learned. She was not a natural shot, but she was determined, and by the end of the second week she could hit a target more often than not. Jacob also taught her how to ride properly, not just sitting pretty on a horse but really riding, in case she needed to get away quickly. But through all the preparation and worry, their life together continued to grow and deepen. They spent their evenings talking and planning for the future, dreaming about expanding the ranch, about children they might have someday, about growing old together. They made love with increasing passion and tenderness, learning each other's bodies and hearts. Julia bloomed under the attention and affection, becoming more confident and radiant with each passing day. 3 weeks and 4 days after Sheriff Bradley's warning, trouble arrived. It was mid-afternoon, and Jacob was in the barn repairing a broken stall door when he heard the sound of multiple horses approaching. He grabbed his rifle and stepped out into the yard to find 5 men on horseback, all dressed in Eastern clothing and looking decidedly out of place on the Kansas prairie. The man in front was older, perhaps 60, with steel gray hair and cold eyes that Jacob recognized from Julia's descriptions. Her father, The other 4 were clearly hired muscle, hard men with guns on their hips. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" Jacob kept his voice even, his rifle held casually but ready. "I am looking for my daughter, Julia Newberry." The older man's voice was clipped and arrogant. "I have been informed she is here." "There is no Julia Newberry here," Jacob said calmly. "There is Julia Lawson, my wife, and she is not available to speak with you." The father's face darkened. "You will bring her out here immediately, or my men will go in and retrieve her." "I would like to see them try." Jacob's voice dropped, becoming dangerous. "This is my property and my wife is under my protection. You are trespassing, and if you do not leave right now, I will have the sheriff arrest all of you. The sheriff of this backwards little town does not frighten me." The father dismounted, and his men did the same. "I've come a very long way to retrieve my daughter, and I am not leaving without her. She has a wedding to attend in Philadelphia. Her wedding was 6 weeks ago to me." Jacob took a step forward. "Julia made her choice. She chose to leave you and your abuse behind. She chose freedom. She chose me. And I am telling you right now, as clearly as I can, you are not taking her anywhere." The older man's face twisted with rage. "She is my daughter, my property. I have every right to take her home. She is 22 years old and married. She is not property. She is a human being with her own will, and she does not want anything to do with you." Jacob raised his rifle slightly. "Leave. Now, before this gets ugly." That was when Julia stepped out onto the porch, and Jacob's heart clenched with fear and pride. She was holding the revolver he had taught her to shoot, and her face was pale but determined. "Father." Her voice rang out clear across the yard. "You need to leave. Julia, stop this nonsense and get in the wagon." Her father gestured imperiously. "We are going home." "I am home." She came down the steps slowly, the gun steady in her hands. "This ranch is my home. Jacob is my husband. You have no power over me anymore. I will have this mockery of a marriage annulled. You are coming back to Philadelphia and you are marrying Harrison like we arranged." "Harrison beat me," Julia said flatly. "He gave me the bruises I arrived here with. He would have killed me eventually, and you did not care. You told me I must have deserved it. So no, father, I am not going anywhere with you. You ungrateful little wretch." Her father took a step toward the porch, and immediately 2 things happened. Jacob moved to intercept him, and the sound of multiple rifles being cocked rang out across the yard. Jacob looked around to find Sheriff Bradley and 6 other men from town positioned around the property, all armed, all aiming at Julia's father and his hired men. "I believe the lady asked you to leave," Sheriff Bradley called out. "So you have got 2 choices here. You can get back on your horses and ride out of Great Bend peacefully. Or you can resist, and my deputies and I will arrest you for trespassing, attempted kidnapping, and anything else I can think of. Your choice." The hired men looked at each other nervously, clearly not having signed up for this level of resistance. Julia's father sputtered with impotent rage, but even he could see the situation was impossible. "This is not over," he hissed at Julia. "I will have lawyers involved. I will sue this man for stealing you away." "Good luck with that." Julia's voice was cold. "I have documentation of everything Harrison did to me, medical records from Dr. Patterson, witness statements from half this town. If you want to take this to court, I will be happy to make your abuse and negligence public record." The old man's face went purple, but he had no response to that. With a sharp gesture, he mounted his horse. His men followed quickly, clearly eager to get away from the armed townspeople. Within moments, they were riding hard back toward town, leaving only dust in their wake. As soon as they were out of sight, Julia's legs gave out. Jacob was there in an instant, catching her, taking the gun from her shaking hands and pulling her into his arms. She was trembling all over, adrenaline and fear and relief crashing through her all at once. "It is over," Jacob murmured into her hair. "You did it, Julia. You stood up to him and you won." "I was so scared," she whispered. "I know, but you did it anyway. That is what courage is." He held her tight, one hand cupping the back of her head. "I am so proud of you." Sheriff Bradley and the other men approached, and Jacob looked up at them with gratitude he could barely express. "Thank you, all of you." "That is what community is for," Bradley said gruffly. "We take care of our own. Your wife is one of us now, and we do not let our people get dragged back into hell." One by one, the men came forward to assure Julia she was safe, that they would stand with her again if needed. By the time they left, she was crying openly, overwhelmed by the support of these people who barely knew her but had shown up anyway. That night, Jacob and Julia lay in bed together, wrapped in each other's arms. "I cannot believe they came," Julia said quietly. "All those people risking themselves for me." "That is what it means to belong somewhere," Jacob told her. "You are not an outsider anymore, Julia. You are part of Great Bend. You are part of this community, and we protect our own." She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Do you think he will really bring lawyers? Try to sue us or annul the marriage? He might try. But it will not work. We have proof we are married, proof you came here willingly, proof of the abuse you suffered. Any judge with half a brain will throw his case out." Jacob stroked her hair. "And even if by some miracle he found a crooked judge, we would fight it, together." "Together," she echoed and snuggled closer. "I like the sound of that, me too." In the weeks that followed, there were no more visits from Philadelphia. The threatened lawyers never materialized, and eventually a terse letter arrived from Julia's father, stating that she was no longer welcome in the family, and he considered her dead to him. Julia read it once, set it aside, and never mentioned it again. The past was the past, and she had a future to build. As autumn turned to winter, the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. Julia proved to be an excellent manager, keeping detailed records and helping Jacob make smart decisions about the livestock. She started corresponding with other ranch wives in the area, forming friendships and building a social network. Margaret came to visit often, and Julia became close with her sister-in-law, the two women laughing and conspiring together in ways that made Jacob both happy and slightly nervous. One cold December morning, Julia woke up feeling ill. She made it to the chamber pot just in time, and Jacob held her hair back, concerned. "Maybe something you ate," he suggested. She wiped her mouth and looked at him with wide eyes. "Or maybe something else entirely." It took him a moment to understand, and then joy flooded through him. "Do you think? I am not certain yet, but the signs are there." She pressed a hand to her still flat stomach. "I have missed my monthly time, and now the sickness. It could be." Jacob pulled her into his arms, gentle and reverent. "We should see Dr. Patterson, make sure you are healthy." The doctor confirmed what they suspected. Julia was indeed pregnant, likely about 6 weeks along, and as healthy as could be expected. The baby would arrive sometime in late June or early July. Jacob left the doctor's office feeling like he was walking on air, and Julia looked radiant despite the morning sickness. They told Margaret first, who shrieked with delight, and immediately began planning a baby celebration. Word spread through town quickly, and soon the whole community was congratulating them. Gifts started arriving at the ranch, hand-knitted blankets and carved toys and practical items they would need. Julia was overwhelmed by the generosity. This woman who had arrived with nothing but a carpetbag and bruises, now surrounded by a community that embraced her as one of their own. Winter passed in a blur of preparation. Jacob built a cradle by the fireplace, carving it carefully from good solid oak. Julia sewed tiny clothes, her hands creating impossibly small garments. They argued cheerfully about names, neither willing to commit to anything yet, but enjoying the discussion. Jacob was protective to the point of being overbearing, not wanting Julia to lift anything heavy or work too hard, but she tolerated it with good humor because she could see the love behind it. Spring arrived with a burst of green across the prairie, and Julia's belly swelled with their child. She planted her rose garden by the porch as planned, and Jacob helped her create a vegetable plot that would feed them through the next winter. They bought 10 more head of cattle with money they had saved, expanding the herd. Life was good, better than either of them had ever imagined it could be. Julia went into labor on a sweltering July afternoon, and Jacob thought he might die from the fear. Dr. Patterson arrived quickly, and Margaret came to help, shooing Jacob out of the bedroom and telling him to boil water and stay out of the way. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next morning. Jacob paced the floor downstairs, praying harder than he had ever prayed in his life. He had faced down rustlers and wild animals, and Julia's fathers hired men without flinching. But the thought of something happening to her or their child terrified him to his core. Finally, as the sun was rising on a new day, he heard the thin wail of a baby crying. He was up the stairs in seconds, bursting through the door to find Julia exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in one of her hand-sewn blankets. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Jacob approached the bed on shaking legs and looked down at the red-faced, squalling infant in her arms. His son. They had a son. The baby had a shock of dark hair and tiny fists that punched the air, clearly unhappy about being evicted from his warm home. "He is perfect," Jacob breathed. "You are perfect, both of you." "Would you like to hold him?" Julia asked. Jacob had never held a baby in his life, but he reached out carefully and let Julia transfer the tiny weight into his arms. The baby stopped crying immediately, blinking up at him with unfocused blue eyes. Something inside Jacob's chest cracked open, a well of love so deep and overwhelming he could barely breathe. This was his son. His and Julia's, created from their love, a symbol of everything they had built together. "Hello there, little man," he murmured. "Welcome to the world. You have got a mama who is the bravest woman who ever lived, and I promise I am going to do everything I can to be worthy of being your papa." Julia was crying happy tears, watching her husband cradle their child. What should we name him? They had discussed so many options, but in that moment only one felt right. "James," Jacob said. "After your mother, James Margaret Lawson." "Margaret is a girl's name," Julia protested, but she was smiling, "so we will call him Jamie, and he can honor both his grandmother and his aunt." Jacob looked down at his son, this tiny miracle. "What do you think, Jamie? Do you approve?" The baby yawned, apparently satisfied with the name, and Julia laughed. "I think that is a yes." Dr. Patterson pronounced both mother and child healthy, gave Jacob a list of instructions, and left them to rest. Margaret hugged them both, crying all over Jamie's little head, and promised to spread the good news. And then it was just the three of them, Jacob and Julia and their son, a family. The first few weeks were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Jamie was a good baby for the most part, but he had his opinions about when he wanted to eat and sleep, and those opinions did not always align with what his parents wanted. Julia was a natural mother, patient and loving even when she was clearly exhausted. Jacob helped whenever he could, changing nappies and walking the floor with Jamie when he was fussy, amazed at how something so small could have so completely taken over his life. They had visitors constantly, it seemed. Everyone in Great Bend wanted to meet the newest member of their community. Gifts continued to pour in, and Julia started keeping a list so she could write thank you notes later. The house that had once felt so empty was now full of life and noise and love. One evening when Jamie was about a month old, Julia found Jacob on the porch, holding their sleeping son and watching the sunset paint the prairie in shades of gold and pink. She came to sit beside him, leaning her head on his shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" "About how much has changed in a year," Jacob said quietly. "Last summer I was alone, wondering if I had made a mistake placing that advertisement, and now I have everything I could ever want. A wife I love more than I knew it was possible to love someone, a son who is perfect in every way." A home full of warmth and laughter. Sometimes I am afraid I am going to wake up and find out it was all a dream. It is real. Julia took his free hand and laced their fingers together. We are real. All of this is real, Jacob. You saved me, you know. That day at the stagecoach, you saved my life. Not just physically, but in every way that matters. You showed me what it meant to be loved and respected and valued. You gave me a home and a family and a future I never thought I could have. You saved me too, he countered. I did not realize how lonely I was until you were here. How much I needed someone to share all of this with. You made this house a home, Julia. You made my life have meaning beyond just surviving day to day. She kissed him, sweet and lingering, and Jamie stirred slightly in his father's arms but did not wake. I love you, Jacob Lawson. I will love you until the day I die and beyond. I love you too. He shifted Jamie carefully so he could put his arm around Julia, holding his entire world in his arms. Thank you for getting on that train. Thank you for being brave enough to run. Thank you for giving me a chance, even when you had every reason not to trust me. Thank you for keeping your promise, she whispered. You said no one would hurt me again, and you meant it. You have never broken that promise, not once. They sat together as the stars came out. A family forged from violence and fear, but sustained by love and trust and unwavering commitment. Jamie slept peacefully, unaware that his very existence was a testament to his parents' courage, proof that even the darkest beginnings could lead to the brightest futures. The years that followed were full and rich. Jamie grew into a bright, energetic boy with his mother's thoughtfulness and his father's determination. When he was 3, Julia gave birth to a daughter they named Caroline, and 2 years after that, another son they called Matthew. The house rang with children's laughter, and the ranch prospered under Julia and Jacob's careful management. Julia never heard from her father again, though she sometimes wondered what became of him. She had no regrets about leaving that life behind. Everything that mattered to her was here on this Kansas prairie, in this house filled with love. She became a respected member of the Great Bend community, known for her kindness and her strength. She helped other women in difficult situations, offering a safe place to stay and practical advice about building a new life. She never forgot what it felt like to arrive broken and terrified, and she made sure no other woman in her community would face that alone. Jacob expanded the ranch significantly over the years, buying adjacent land and building up a herd that was the envy of the county. But his real pride was never in the cattle or the acres. It was in his family, in the wife who had transformed from a frightened refugee into a confident, capable woman who ran their home and partnership with wisdom and grace. It was in his children, who grew up knowing they were loved and valued and safe. On their 10th anniversary, Jacob took Julia back into town, to the spot where the stagecoach had stopped all those years ago. They stood together looking at the general store, holding hands just like they had that first day. You ever regret it? Jacob asked, answering that advertisement. Coming out here to marry a stranger, Julia turned to look at him, this man who had kept every promise he ever made to her, who had shown her what real love looked like. Not for a single second. You were the best risk I ever took. You were not a risk, he said. You were a certainty. From the moment I saw you step off that coach, bruised and scared but still standing, still fighting, I knew you were someone special. I knew my life would never be the same. You were right about that. She smiled up at him. Thank you for seeing me, Jacob. Not just the bruises and the fear, but the person underneath. Thank you for giving me time to heal. Thank you for loving me. Loving you has been the easiest thing I have ever done. He pulled her close and kissed her, there in the street where their story had begun. And Julia melted into him, still feeling that same spark, that same sense of rightness she had felt from the beginning. They walked back to where their wagon waited, where their 3 children were playing under Margaret's watchful eye. Jamie, now 10, was trying to teach 6-year-old Caroline how to skip stones, while 3-year-old Matthew toddled around picking up pebbles. It was a scene of simple domestic happiness, but to Jacob and Julia it was everything. That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, they lay in bed together, Julia's head on Jacob's chest, his arms around her. This was their ritual, this quiet time together before sleep, when they talked about the day and made plans for tomorrow. "I have been thinking," Julia said, "about maybe taking in a foster child. There are so many children who need homes and we have room and love to spare." Jacob was quiet for a moment, considering. Then he said, "I think that is a beautiful idea. We can talk to the church, see if there is anyone who needs placement. Thank you." She kissed his chest, "for always supporting my ideas, even the crazy ones. They are never crazy. They are compassionate and thoughtful, just like you." He tightened his arms around her. "Besides, you supported me when I wanted to buy that impossible horse last year." "Thunder is not impossible, he is just spirited," Julia defended, and Jacob laughed. "He is impossible and you know it, but I love him anyway." "Like you loved me," she murmured. "Impossible and difficult, but you loved me anyway." "You were never impossible," Jacob said seriously. "You were hurt and scared, and that is completely different, and I did not love you anyway. I loved you because of who you are, because you are brave and strong and kind, because you make me want to be a better man every single day." Julia propped herself up to look at him, her hair falling around them like a curtain. "How did I get so lucky? To find you when I was running for my life, to have you be exactly the man you claimed to be in those letters. I am the lucky one." He cupped her face gently. "You could have chosen anywhere to run to, anyone to trust with your life, and you chose me. That is a gift I will never take for granted." She kissed him then, deep and passionate, and they made love with the ease of long practice and deep affection, their bodies knowing each other as well as their hearts did. Afterwards, tangled together in the moonlight streaming through the window, Julia said, "I am so glad I answered your advertisement." "So am I." Jacob kissed her forehead. "So am I." 20 years after Julia first arrived in Great Bend, the ranch had become one of the most successful in the county. Their children had grown into remarkable adults. Jamie was 23 and running the ranch alongside his father, preparing to take over completely one day. Caroline was 19 and teaching at the local school, following in her mother's footsteps of helping others. Matthew was 16 and still deciding what he wanted to do with his life, but he was thoughtful and kind, and both his parents knew he would find his path. They had taken in 4 foster children over the years, providing a safe home for kids who needed one. 3 had eventually been reunited with family, but one, a girl named Sarah, had stayed and become as much their daughter as any of their biological children. She was now 21 and married to a good man who owned the feed store in town. Julia stood on the porch of the ranch house, which had been expanded twice over the years, and looked out over the land she had come to love. Her hair was streaked with gray now, and there were lines on her face that had not been there when she was 22, but she had never been happier. Every line was a badge of a life well lived, of laughter and love and hard work. Jacob came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. He was 50 now, his dark hair more silver than brown, but he was still strong and vital, still the man she had fallen in love with all those years ago. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, the same question he had asked 1,000 times over the years. "About that girl who stepped off the stagecoach with a black eye and a heart full of fear," Julia said. "I barely recognize her anymore. She seems like someone from a different lifetime." "She was brave," Jacob said. "She ran toward hope even when everything in her life had taught her not to hope. She trusted a stranger with her life. She rebuilt herself from ashes. You should recognize her because she is still you, just older and wiser and surrounded by people who love her." Julia turned in his arms to face him. I could not have done any of it without you. You know that, right? You gave me the space and safety to heal. You showed me what love really looks like. You built this life with me. We built it together." He kissed her softly. "And I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Every moment, every challenge, every joy, all of it. Even the time Matthew broke his arm falling out of the tree and I panicked. Even then. Even the year the drought nearly ruined us. Even then. Even the time I accidentally let all the chickens out and we spent 3 hours chasing them," Jacob laughed. "Especially then. That was hilarious." She swatted his arm playfully, and he caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. "I mean it, Julia. I would not change a single thing about our life together, even the hard parts, because they brought us here. To this moment, with our family thriving and our love stronger than ever. I love you, Jacob Lawson." The words came as easily now as they had the first time she said them, 20 years ago. "I will love you until my last breath and beyond. I love you too." He held her close and they swayed together slightly, dancing to music only they could hear. "My mail-order bride who arrived with a black eye and changed my entire world. Your partner," she corrected. "Your wife, your best friend, your mail-order bride who became so much more." "Yes," he agreed. "All of that and more. Everything I ever needed, everything I never knew to ask for. Thank you for taking that leap of faith. Thank you for trusting me with your heart. Thank you for proving I could trust you." She pulled back to look up at him, her eyes full of love and memories and gratitude. "Thank you for keeping your promise. You said no one would hurt me again, and you have spent 20 years making sure that was true, not just physically, but in every way. You have protected my heart as fiercely as you protected my body that first day. It has been my honor." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. "Every single day with you has been an honor and a gift." Their children and grandchildren, because Caroline had given them 2 grandchildren in recent years, would be arriving soon for Sunday dinner. The house would fill with noise and laughter and life, the way it always did when the family gathered. There would be arguments and jokes and stories told, food shared and love expressed in 100 small ways. But for now, in this quiet moment before the chaos, it was just Jacob and Julia. The cowboy and his mail-order bride. The man who had promised protection and the woman who had been brave enough to believe him. 2 people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built something beautiful and lasting. The Kansas wind blew across the prairie, carrying with it the scent of growing things and the promise of tomorrow. The same wind that had blown the day Julia arrived, scared and beaten but not broken. The same wind that had witnessed their first meeting, their first words, the moment their story began. And as Jacob and Julia stood together on the porch of their home, holding each other close, that wind seemed to whisper a truth they had always known. That love could heal the deepest wounds. That trust could be rebuilt from ruins. That from the darkest beginnings, the brightest futures could grow. Julia had arrived with a black eye and a carpetbag full of fear. She had found a cowboy who kept his promises, a community that embraced her, and a love that transformed her entire world. She had built a life beyond her wildest dreams, raised a family, and became a woman she could be proud of. And Jacob, who had been looking for a partner, had found so much more. He had found purpose and passion, and a reason to be the best man he could be. He had found a woman who matched him in strength and courage, who challenged him and supported him and loved him with her whole heart. Together, they had created something remarkable. Not just a successful ranch or a large family, though they had both of those things. They had created a legacy of love and safety and second chances. They had proved that it was never too late to start over, never too late to choose hope over fear, never too late to find where you truly belonged. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant colors, they heard the sound of wagons approaching. Their family coming home. Julia squeezed Jacob's hand and he squeezed back, a silent communication of love and partnership that needed no words. "Ready?" he asked. "Always," she answered. "As long as I am with you, I am always ready." They walked down the porch steps together, hand in hand, to greet their children and grandchildren, to share a meal and make memories and continue the beautiful, complicated, wonderful life they had built together. A life that had started with violence and fear, but had become a testament to the power of love, trust, and unwavering commitment. Julia looked back once at the house, at the home she had helped create, and felt a surge of pride and gratitude. She had come here with nothing but hope and desperation. She had found everything she never knew she needed. And she had learned the most important truth of all, that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was trust someone with your broken pieces and believe they would help you become whole again. Jacob had promised no one would hurt her again, and he had spent 20 years keeping that promise in every possible way. He had given her safety and love and partnership. He had given her a home and a family and a future filled with joy. He had given her himself, completely and unreservedly, and that was the greatest gift of all. As the evening unfolded around them, full of laughter and love and the chaotic beauty of family, Julia caught Jacob's eye across the crowded table. He winked at her, that same gentle smile on his face, and she felt her heart swell with love. 20 years, and she still got butterflies when he looked at her like that. 20 years, and she was still falling in love with him every single day. This was their happily ever after. Not perfect, because life was never perfect, but real and earned and precious beyond measure. They had started with a mail-order bride arrangement and built a love story for the ages. They had taken broken pieces and created something whole and beautiful. They had chosen each other every single day for 20 years, and they would continue choosing each other for all the days to come. And in the end, that was what mattered most. Not how the story began, but how it continued. Not the wounds they carried, but how they healed together. Not the fear that had brought Julia to Kansas, but the love that had convinced her to stay. She reached under the table and took Jacob's hand, and he squeezed it gently, understanding flowing between them without words. They had come so far from that day at the stagecoach. They had built a life, raised a family, created a legacy. And through it all, they had loved each other with a depth and commitment that only grew stronger with time. The mail-order bride with the black eye had found her cowboy, and together they had found their forever. It was not always easy, but it was always worth it. And they lived out their days in the home they built together, surrounded by the family they created, secure in the knowledge that they had found in each other exactly what they both needed. Someone to trust, someone to love, someone to build a beautiful life with on the wild Kansas prairie. Their story, which had begun with fear and violence, ended with love and joy in a house full of people who existed because a young woman was brave enough to run, and a cowboy was good enough to keep his promises. It was a story of healing and hope, of second chances and new beginnings, of finding home in the most unexpected places. And every time the wind blew across the prairie, it carried with it the echo of that first promise, the words that had changed everything. No one would hurt her again. A simple promise, kept faithfully for a lifetime, that had made all the difference in the world.